Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
谁妄想这样干，必将在14多亿中国人民用血肉。
Today, China threw a grand birthday party. More than 70,000 people, hundreds of balloons, scores of fighter jets, and the world's cameras turned to Beijing's Tiananmen Square. It was the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party. It was celebration of the Chinese leader. Xi Jinping is the party and the party is the country. And that's his message to his countrymen and women. He commands absolute control. And he openly threatens adversaries, saying that he'll crack their heads and spill blood. This is the president speaking. He says China does not oppress and it will not take lectures from the world's masters. The speech was long, but it did not say anything new. On Gravitas tonight, as we bring you the highlights, we'll also tell you the story of the CCP, the Communist Party of China. It was founded as a party of revolution. It then became a party of rule and is today a party of repression. It is Xi Jinping's cabal with authority minus accountability. We'll tell you more about it. Also on the show tonight, India talks tough and Europe falls in line. If Europe won't recognize Indian vaccines, India will put Europeans in quarantine. Sure enough, European countries have begun recognizing Covishield. In Canada, more mass graves have been found in Catholic schools. As pressure mounts, neither the government of Canada nor the Vatican wants to take responsibility for the abuse and murders. US TV actress Alison Mack sentenced to 3 years in jail in a sex cult case. She helped recruit young women as sex slaves in the US, Mexico and Canada. And India thanks its frontline workers on National Doctors' Day. We begin with Gravitas Global Headlines.
In a sign of expansion of nuclear capabilities, China is constructing more than 100 new silos for intercontinental ballistic missiles in a desert near its human city. The development comes amid strained ties between the US and China, as well as a border standoff between India and China since last year. $40 billion have been pledged by global leaders and organizations at an international conference in Paris to boost gender and equality.
If we want to strengthen democracy, we must fight for gender equality.
US Vice President Kamala Harris says women deprived of freedom of speech or freedom to vote should fight for their rights. South Africa's top court cleared President Cyril Ramaphosa of lying to Parliament about a donation to his 2017 election campaign.
The president could not inadvertently and deliberately mislead Parliament.
The anti-graft watchdog had earlier alleged that there was evidence of money laundering involving millions of rands. Germany's CureVac jab against COVID-19 found to have an efficacy rate of just 48% according to final trial results. This is a big blow to the German vaccine maker, as its jab shows far lower efficacy than rival ones developed by BioNTech and Moderna. The United States has urged European nations to delay a proposed bloc-wide digital tax as it could derail work on a planned global minimum tax rate. The new EU tax is scheduled to be announced on July 14th, and the US says it could derail negotiations at a sensitive time on global taxation. Shock and anger pours in over the release of U.S. comedian Bill Cosby from prison after his sexual assault conviction was overturned. Cosby's conviction in 2018 for drugging and molesting an ex-basketball player was seen as a watershed moment in the Me Too movement, which highlighted sexual assault allegations against those in power. As foreign troops withdraw from Afghanistan, the chairman of the High Council for National Reconciliation says the country's survival and unity is in danger. Abdullah Abdullah says the Taliban has increased the war on the battlefield. A Los Angeles court denied pop star Britney Spears' request to have her father dropped as her co-conservator. The singer earlier delivered a moving testimony at a virtual court hearing, requesting an end to her conservatorship, where she said her father loved the control to hurt his own daughter. The exodus of top seeds in the women's draw at Wimbledon has continued, with third seed Elina Svitolina the latest casualty. A semi-finalist here in 2019, Svitolina was stunned 6-3, 6-4 by Polish world number 44 Magda Linette in the second round. Fourth seed Sofia Kenin and ninth seed Belinda Bencic were eliminated on Wednesday, and only 4 of the top 10 remain in the draw. The Phoenix Suns have reached their first NBA Finals in 28 years after completing a 4-2 series victory over the Los Angeles Clippers. 11-time All-Star Chris Paul starred with a career playoff high 41 points, while Devin Booker had 22 as the Suns dominated Game 6 to win 130-103. The Suns will face either the Milwaukee Bucks or the Atlanta Hawks for the title.
万岁！
That's how the Communist Party of China celebrated its birthday. 70,000 attendees at the Tiananmen Square, thousands of performers, and a gun salute with 100 cannons. China went all out to let the world know whose birthday it is. But this grand celebration was not about the Communist Party. It was about this man, Xi Jinping, the supreme leader of China, the chairman of all things, as he's called. The Chinese president stood out today. In an appearance that was carefully choreographed, Xi Jinping was flanked by previous and current leaders of the Communist Party. They were all dressed in dark suits, but Xi Jinping himself was wearing a grey high-collar cut suit, a design immortalized by Mao Zedong. He was the founder of modern-day China. His outsized portrait hung beneath Xi Jinping today. The comparison was striking. In his bid to showcase himself as the greatest leader of China since Mao, Xi Jinping dressed exactly like him. But the similarities are superficial. Xi is his own man. He spoke for more than 1 hour today. He painted the Communist Party as China's savior, as the force leading China's rise. The speech was filled with warnings and threats for China's adversaries. Today, Xi Jinping sounded like one of his own wolf warrior diplomats. He began on a defensive note, though. He said that China had oppressed no one and that Chinese people uphold justice. They've never bullied, oppressed, or enslaved people of other countries. Listen to this.
We Chinese are a people who uphold justice and are not intimidated by threats of force. As a nation, we have a strong sense of pride and confidence. We have never bullied, oppressed, or subjugated the people of any other country, and we never will.
Well, he won't find many takers for this argument outside China. For that matter, he won't find many within China either. Because Beijing's oppression is not limited to other countries, it begins at home. Look at the Uyghurs, the Tibetans, the Mongolians. Of course, Xi Jinping did not talk about any of them. He was busy issuing threats, you see. He said countries will, quote-unquote, crack their heads and spill blood if they come after China. This is the Chinese president speaking.
At the same time, the Chinese people will never allow foreign forces to bully, oppress, or enslave us. Whoever nurses delusions of doing that will crack their heads and spill blood on the Great Wall of Steel, built from the flesh and blood of 1.4 billion Chinese people.
The next warning was for the United States. The Chinese president said his country will never accept, and I'm quoting again, never accept arrogant lecturing from master teachers. He did not name America, but he made it quite clear that the US should mind its own business.
We are also eager to learn what lesson we can from the achievements of other cultures and welcome helpful suggestions and constructive criticism. We will not, however, accept sanctimonious preaching from those who feel they have the right to lecture us. The party and the Chinese people will keep moving confidently forward in broad strides along the path that we have chosen for ourselves. And we will make sure the destiny of China's development and progress remains firmly in our own hands.
The signal from Xi Jinping was this: China faces challenges from the world outside and only the Communist Party can fight back. The speech and the event were full of symbolism. Look at this. What's the first thing that strikes you? No masks. This is a crowd of 70,000 people gathered at the Tiananmen Square. No one has a mask on. This is the home country of the Wuhan virus. As the world struggles with second and third waves with deadly variants, China is having a birthday party minus masks. They're trying to tell the world that they've defeated the virus. There was symbolism in the skies too. Nearly 80 aircraft from the People's Liberation Army took flight today. Some of them arranged themselves in the form of the number 100 to mark the 100th birthday. The military is a very important part of Xi Jinping's power design. He promised to beef up the Chinese forces. And he said that the Communist Party must maintain absolute leadership, again his words, absolute leadership over the PLA. He demanded complete political loyalty from the military. Loyalty to the leaders, not to the country for the military. Note the difference.
Maintain the party's absolute leadership over the people's military and follow the path of strengthening the military with Chinese characteristics. Forge ahead with building a solid political foundation of the military, military reforms, technological development, talent development, and law-based administration.
In the rest of the speech, he stuck to the usual script: complete reunification with Taiwan, the one country, two systems model as in Hong Kong, the regular fare. The crowd dutifully played along. At the end of the ceremony, they sang a song called "Without the Communist Party, There Would Be No China." And if there were any protesters, they were carefully kept away from the cameras. Unfortunately for them, the Communist Party could not hide or stop the protests in New Delhi and Dharamshala, which is the home of the Tibetan government in exile. And in both these places, New Delhi and Dharamshala, protesters gathered to denounce the Communist Party and Xi Jinping. So today's event in a nutshell: billion people of China, that the Communist Party is China and that Xi Jinping is a Communist Party. It's all about him. And this party was not always synonymous with Xi Jinping. The CCP story begins at the end of the First World War. China had sent 140,000 laborers to help the powers. And when the war ended, China failed to gain any concessions. What's more, the Treaty of Versailles transferred the special privileges of the Chinese province of Shandong to Japan. This was seen as a failure of the Republican government in China. On the 4th of May 1919, students held a mass demonstration in protest in Beijing, and these protests soon snowballed into a movement, one that triggered a rise in Chinese nationalism. A teacher named Mao Zedong started thinking of ways to navigate China out of its social and economic misery. He founded the Communist Party as a party of revolution. It soon became a party to ensure his hold on power, a party of rule. And today, the Communist Party is a party of repression. Here's the story.
In 1931, Mao Zedong declares the Chinese Soviet Republic. The Republic of China sets out to destroy it. In October 1934, the Communist Party begins a 6,000-mile march. The men and women cross 14 mountain ranges and 24 rivers to finally reach the province of Shanxi. The heroism of the Long March inspires many to join the CCP. It also establishes Mao Zedong as the party's undisputed leader. During the Second World War, the communists find grassroots support. After the war, the Chinese Communist Party defeats the nationalist government. On the 1st of October 1949, Mao Zedong proclaims the People's Republic of China. Once in power, the CCP speeds up China's industrial revolution. How? Through labor-intensive methods. It emphasizes on manpower rather than machines. Cultural purity over expertise. Programs are implemented in haste. The result is disastrous. Nearly 20 million people die of starvation between 1959 and 1962. Then comes the Cultural Revolution. In 1966, Mao wants to get rid of his enemies, reassert his authority, destroy the feudal culture, and in August 1966, Mao orders the closure of schools. The youth are called upon to take some party leaders to task. Why? For their bourgeois values. Students are told to get rid of 4 olds: old customs, old culture, old habits, and old ideas. In the months that follow, students form a paramilitary group, the Red Guards. They harass and attack China's elderly and intellectuals. Historians believe that at least 2 million people lost their lives. Mao Zedong dies in 1976. The Gang of 4 is arrested. It's the end of an era in the Chinese Communist Party. Deng Xiaoping takes charge. It's a turning point for China. He opens up the country, gives the markets a free rein. But repression still remains a tool of power. In 1989, students are killed at the Tiananmen Square. Thousands gather to demand democracy, free speech, and a free press. The Communist Party sends tanks to fight them. The massacre of innocent students is met with international criticism and isolation. The CCP turns the focus on economic growth, starts building the China that we know today. 30 years later, history repeats itself in Hong Kong. Pro-democracy protests break out in the city in 2019. The Chinese Communist Party imposes the Hong Kong security law. It criminalizes secession, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces. The CCP is one of the few communist parties to have withstood the democratic wave. That's because it mixes communism with authoritarianism. Under Xi Jinping, the CCP has dropped the term limits for leaders. Xi himself has emerged as China's most powerful leader since Mao. Today, the Chinese Communist Party has 95.15 million members in China. Outside it, there are millions who despise it. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Power is seamless. It flows endlessly, but from different sources. In democracies like India and America, power comes from the law. But in communist regimes like China, power rests in people. It flows from a supreme leader. And history tells us these leaders are ambitious and ruthless. Look at what China's founding father, Mao Zedong, said. Political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. 100 years and nothing has changed. Xi Jinping too believes in raw military power. He wants to eclipse all leaders of China, including Mao. And he doesn't see himself as a peasant leader. The new helmsman, as he's called, is a lot more savvy. At least that's what he wants the world to believe. That's what his propaganda factory feeds the world. Xi Jinping can critique Tolstoy's War and Peace, and he can also appreciate ancient Chinese literature. You'd think that's a lot of spare time for a man leading 1.4 billion people, but who will question the leader in China? At the end of the day, though, people care only about two things: food on the table and money in their pockets. And China is running out of both. This birthday party, with all its balloons and fighter jets, cannot hide that story from the world. Here's what Xi Jinping is aiming for: total control. He is the Communist Party. The Politburo is his own cabal. The PLA dances to his command. But how did he become so powerful? Part of it is just pretense. You see, in communist regimes, power is like a game of musical chairs. It doesn't matter if people support you. What counts is being in the right place at the right time. Popularity comes later, if it comes at all. And Xi Jinping is the perfect example of this, because his record is nothing exemplary. We'll show you some numbers. Xi Jinping became president in the year 2013. This is China's GDP growth since then. Look at that curve. It was 7.77% in 2013. By 2020, 2.27%. And that is bad news, because every autocrat wants two things: a strong economy so that no one complains, and a nationalist population that will ignore abuses. Now, Xi Jinping's economy, we can tell you, is failing on many fronts. Number one is the structure. China is a photocopier, not a factory. Think about it. Can you name one premium Chinese automaker? Or one premium Chinese designer? Chances are you can't, and that's a problem for China, because during recession, only one thing will help companies survive, and that's brand and heritage. China has neither. Problem number two, debt. Yes, even Shakespeare's Shylock has loans to pay. China's overall debt was 270% of the GDP in 2020. Most of it is owned by state financial institutions, the engines of China's growth. What's Beijing doing to fix this? It is piling debt on debt. So banks are crumbling. The notorious Chinese checkbook is running out of pages. Problem number three, the world is turning away. Foreign investment is drying up. For years, China was the golden child of investors, dollars pumped in, building ghost cities and highways to nowhere. But take a look at the recent figures. In 2013, foreign investment made up 3.71% of the GDP. By 2019, 1%. That's the allure of Xi Jinping for you. The bottom line is this: China is not an economic unicorn anymore. The so-called hybrid communism is failing, and with that, the trust in Xi Jinping and his minions. And this is a dangerous trend in autocratic regimes. When people run out of money, they look at the society, and what do they see? An absolute lack of freedoms. The China you see on CGTN or on Global Times is not the real China. In the real China, every movement is monitored, every word is processed. In China, freedom is not a right, and in some places, challenges are emerging. So what does the government do? It cracks down with force. Do you know that China's internal security budget is bigger than its military budget? There are millions in the People's Armed Police to control protests. The government calls it stability maintenance. And yet China's cities are perfect breeding grounds for revolution. They're congested dust bowls. Records say China's middle class is 400 million strong. That's bigger than America's entire population, 400 million. By 2030, China's middle class is expected to touch 900 million. Imagine 900 million people with aspirations and dreams, 900 million people whose freedoms have been curbed. It's almost poetic. The so-called Workers' Party is the nightmare for those same workers. And now that party wants them to have children, not one or two, but three. China is running out of people, and it's running out fast. By 2050, 33% of the people will be over 60 years of age in China. China is turning into an aging country, running out of workers and soldiers. To escape this party prison, many Chinese citizens are turning to social media, TikTok, Weibo, and others. This digital world offers a lot of freedom, I dare say even dissent. So what does China do? Crack down again, this time on tech giants, dismantle the likes of Alibaba and Tencent, slap them with massive fines, put a leash on celebrity CEOs like Jack Ma. The Communist Party thinks it has succeeded. In reality, it has killed its golden goose. This is the reality of Xi Jinping's China, an economic power on the decline, a civil society clamoring for freedoms. How long can Xi Jinping hold on to this? What has a century of communist revolution created? An unequal society, a series of autocratic rulers, and an economy that defies every Marxist theory. Xi Jinping believes that he will decide the fate of China, and he is right. But fate is not always a happily ever after. Sometimes it is the end of an era. To Canada now, where horrors from a different era have returned to haunt the country. Another mass grave of school children has been unearthed. A third since May. 182 unmarked graves have been found in British Columbia. By now, so far, in fact, more than 1,000 mass graves have been found in Canada. The findings have led to an angry backlash. But no one wants to take responsibility, not the Justin Trudeau government and not the Catholic Church. Here's a report.
The Indigenous communities of Canada are living a nightmare on repeat. In recent weeks, more than 1,000 unmarked graves of their loved ones have been found. Another 182 graves have now been discovered at former Indigenous schools, the third such find since May. The remains are believed to be of students between 7 to 15 years old. Some bodies were buried in shallow graves only 3 and 4 feet deep. They were found near Cranbrook in British Columbia, at the St. Eugene's Mission Residential School. From late 1800s to late 1990s, more than 150,000 Indigenous children were forced to attend residential schools. These schools were operated by the Catholic Church on the behalf of the federal government. These schools were a front for a forced assimilation campaign. The children were barred from speaking their language. They suffered sexual and physical abuse at the hands of school authorities. Many students disappeared. They are now being found in unmarked graves. The grim history has entered current politics. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is under pressure. The opposition is calling him inconsiderate. Indigenous community leaders and advocates are protesting. They want the government to cancel the Canada Day celebrations, insisting that Canada has nothing to celebrate. But Trudeau has turned down the idea. Instead, he is pointing fingers at the Catholic Church. He wants the Pope to apologize for what happened in Canada's Catholic schools.
I have spoken personally, directly, with His Holiness Pope Francis to impress upon him how important it is, not just that he makes an apology, but that he makes an apology to Indigenous Canadians on Canadian soil. I know that the Catholic Church leadership is looking and very actively engaged in what next steps can be taken.
The Vatican had refused to apologize. It is facing a violent backlash. 2 Catholic churches were set ablaze in Canada on Wednesday. In recent days, as many as 8 churches have been either destroyed or damaged in suspicious fires. Last week, a statue of Pope John Paul II was defaced outside a church. Red paint was smeared across the base of the statue. Canadian police have launched an investigation into all incidents. Canada is facing up to its brutal history. Violence should be unacceptable, but so should be any attempts to brush the state's culpability under the carpet. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Europe is in the headlines again, and again for the wrong reasons. It tried to use its vaccine green pass to keep Indians out. India talked tough, and Europe is falling in line. More than 8 European countries have already opened the doors for Indians. I'll start from the beginning. The Green Pass is active starting today. It recognizes only 4 vaccines. None of them are approved in India. So even Covishield will not get you into Europe. And Covishield is a virtual twin of Europe's AstraZeneca, the same vaccine in a different bottle. But Covishield is made in India, and the European Union has not approved it yet. So this was their message to India: get your vaccine approved, file an application, do clinical studies, basically a repeat of what was done months back. What's the other option? Quarantine. 14 days of isolation for Indian travellers for every stop in Europe. So the Green Pass was essentially a tool to discourage Indians from travelling to Europe. What does India do? New Delhi is not waiting around for Brussels. They're not waiting for the EU to change policy. Instead, India is setting its own terms. The message is this: take it or leave it. If Europe does not recognize COVID certificates, India will not recognize European ones. And European travellers will also have to quarantine themselves for 14 days in India. In all fairness, the first attempt was diplomatic. Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar was in Europe for the G20 meeting. He met with EU foreign ministers and the EU Commissioner for International Cooperation, and this was his message after the talks. I'm quoting: discuss the COVID challenge, our connectivity partnership and development cooperation, underline the importance of equitable vaccine access and a fair travel regime. Note that last point, a fair travel regime. After all, Europe masterminded globalization, open borders, easy immigration. So why the hesitancy now? Brussels may call it a technicality, but this policy reeks of vaccine apartheid. So India set its own rules. And in response, European nations are already changing their policy. So far, 9 European countries have agreed to put Covishield on the travel list. 7 of them are in the European Union. Plus, we have Switzerland and Iceland. Which are these 7 EU countries? Austria, Germany, Slovenia, Greece, Ireland, Spain, and Estonia. In fact, sources say Estonia is going one step ahead. They're planning to accept Covaxin as well. If it's good enough for India, it should be good enough for us. That's what Estonia is saying. But that still leaves 20 European nations, including France, Hungary, Italy, Portugal, and Belgium. These are top destinations for Indians. So what will India do? Europe wants to create a regime of immunity passports. Well, 2 can play at that game. This is what Indian government sources are telling us. We have requested EU member states to individually consider extending similar exemption to those persons who have taken COVID-19 vaccines in India, that is Covishield and Covaxin, and accept the vaccination certificate issued through the CoWIN portal. And there's more. We've also conveyed, listen to this, we've also conveyed to EU member states that India will institute a reciprocal policy for recognition of the EU digital COVID certificate. What's the message here? Accept our vaccine certificates and we will accept yours. Think of it as a diplomatic tit for tat. If Europe disagrees, their travellers will have to undergo quarantine in India. So will Europe yield? Well, there's certainly enough incentive for them to do so. In 2018, nearly 2 million Europeans visited India. And from here, nearly 10 million Indians toured Europe. That's a lot of foreign exchange changing hands, a lot of tourism, a lot of jobs at stake. And we are not even going into the business interests. Dozens of Indian multinationals operate in Europe and vice versa. There is enough incentive on both sides to resume seamless travel. Even the United Nations agrees. The UN in fact says that any vaccine approved by the World Health Organization should be fine. The likes of Hungary also use Sputnik 5, though it's not approved by the WHO. By the way, Germany has unveiled a new vaccine. It is called CureVac. Do you know what its efficacy is? Just 48%. 48. But when it comes to Indian vaccines, the shutters go up. That's Europe's story. A handful of countries have changed their policy, and that's a welcome move. But others need to follow suit, because right now there is only one country in the world that demands travellers to take their own vaccine, and that country is China. And that's not a list that Europe wants to be on. To the United States, where a TV star has been sent to prison for recruiting and grooming young girls to be sex slaves. Her name is Alison Mack. Some of you would know her from her role in a series called Smallville. She's been convicted for being a slave master at NXIVM. This is a barbaric cult that functioned in the guise of a marketing company. Some of America's richest celebrities were its members. How did the cult operate? Which countries was it present in? And what sort of rituals did it follow? Here's a report.
This is Alison Mack, a fresh-faced American TV star, the winner of several Teen Choice Awards. She gained a legion of fans playing the clever girl next door in the hit series Smallville. But her spectacular fall from grace is unbelievable even by TV drama standards. She has been sentenced to 3 years in jail for recruiting and grooming young girls to be sex slaves. 38-year-old Mack was a top slave master at NXIVM, a sex cult that operated in the guise of a marketing company. The organization existed for nearly 2 decades, claiming to offer self-help programs to America's powerful elite. It was founded by this man, 60-year-old Keith Rainier, who was once hailed by the Dalai Lama for his ethical work. In 2017, an expose blew the lid off the ethics that existed at NXIVM. The many charges against its members included racketeering, identity theft, extortion, forced labor, money laundering, and sex trafficking. But how exactly did the cult operate? The organization ran several executive success programs which people had to sign up for to gain entry. The ESPs were marketed as a set of development courses that helped participants overcome their fears and anxieties and hence gain their full potential in life. These programs came at a steep price. The cost of a 5-day intensive course was $5,000. But the price most participants ended up paying was emotional and physical torture. For days, the participants would live together in a commune-like housing facility for each program. At the beginning of each session, they would read aloud and follow a mission statement which asked them to reject victimhood. Rainier, who overlooked most of the sessions, was hailed as a godlike figure and had to be greeted with a kiss on the mouth. The female participants were then blindfolded and branded with the symbol of Keith Rainier's initials. The emotionally vulnerable ones were sent to a highly secret women's society and served as sex slaves for Rainier. They were punished with starvation if they refused, subjected to abuse and extortion if they threatened to leave. This barbaric cult functioned like this for 2 decades without being caught. Between 1998 and 2018, over 16,000 people completed courses at its centers in the US, Canada, and Mexico.
This trial has revealed that Rainier, who portrayed himself as a savant and a genius, was in fact a master manipulator, a con man, and the crime boss of a cult-like organization.
Most of its top members have now been convicted for getting teenagers caught in this cult. The conviction of Alison Mack is the most high-profile yet. She has called it a horrific chapter of her life and expressed remorse at her actions. But one of her victims says she doesn't feel any remorse from her.
She is a monster and a sociopath, and she has created so much harm for me, her victims, and so many people involved. And I do pray that one day she can see the light, but I don't think that was today.
Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Our next story is about an exchange in Pakistan's National Assembly that deserves an Oscar nomination for the weirdest verbal spat, if there ever is such a category. The nominees would be Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, the chairman of the Pakistan People's Party, and Shah Mahmood Qureshi, the foreign minister of Pakistan. The two men literally brought the house down with their tongue-in-cheek barbs. We'll get to that in just a bit. First, you must know the backstory. Shah Mahmood Qureshi is infamous for being a party hopper. He has switched his political allegiance several times. Started his career in 1986 with the Pakistan Muslim League, which was Nawaz Sharif's party. In 2002, switched to the Pakistan People's Party, led by Benazir Bhutto. And in 2011, Qureshi joined the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, Imran Khan's party. Now, Bilawal Bhutto struck Qureshi's raw nerve by bringing up his history of being a political turncoat. He said he has known Qureshi since childhood, seen him raise slogans for his party and publicly praise his parents to save his ministry, all the while claiming that Imran Khan is yet to know the kind of person he is, Qureshi. The foreign minister almost had a meltdown. You have to watch this exchange.
स्पीकर, आप खान साहब को बताएं कि इस शख्स को पहचाने। मैं तो बचपन से देखते आ रहा हूं, मैंने उसको भुट्टो का नारा देखा, लगाते हुए देखा। मैंने अपने बचपन से ये मैंने देखा है जनाब स्पीकर। अपना वजारत बचाने के लिए मैंने तो इस फाजिल मेंबर को अगली बारी फिर जरदारी का नारा लगाते हुए देखा। और आप देखिए वो आपका वजीर आजम के साथ क्या करता है।
इनको जानता हूं जब ये इतने से जब कोने में खड़े होते थे और गिड़कियां खाते थे, मैं इनको तब से जानता हूं। मैं इनको भी जानता हूं, इनके बाबा को भी जानता हूं। ये मुझे क्या जानते हैं जनाबे वाला, ये बात करते हैं, जानता हूं। और ये बात कर रहे हैं पीपल्स पार्टी की। मैंने 2013 में 2018 में तुम्हारी जमानत जब्त करके आया, बैठा हूं यहाँ। क्या बात कर रहे हैं?
It did not end there. Bhutto then went on to say that the ISI, Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI should have Qureshi's phone tapped because he's always aspired to be the Prime Minister. A livid Qureshi responded by calling Bilawal a child who reads his speeches from chits.
ISI को कहना चाहिए शाह महमूद का फोन टैप करे। वो जब वो हमारा फॉरेन मिनिस्टर था तो दुनिया में कैंपेन करता था कि यूसुफ रज़ा गिलानी को नहीं, मुझे वज़ीर आज़म बना दो। थैंक यू जी, मैं आपके सामने सच लेकर आ रहा हूँ। यही तो वजह है कि इसको फारिग किया गया था वजारत से।
लिखी हुई 2-4 पर्चियां पढ़ा देते हैं बच्चे को, आके बच्चा ऑटो पे ऑन हो जाता है, स्विच ऑन हो जाता है, स्विच ऑफ हो जाता है। अभी कुछ वक्त लगेगा बच्चा, कुछ वक्त लगेगा।
Now, I don't know what's funnier, the childish barbs being traded or the fact that Bilawal Bhutto Zardari called upon the ISI to spy on the foreign minister of Pakistan. Of course, it was meant as a joke, but it lays bare the sham of democracy that is Pakistan, where parliamentarians so casually acknowledge that secret service agencies have the power to spy on all of them. Also, the exchange that you just saw unfolded during a debate on the country's budget. Instead of debating the pros and cons of the budget, the top leaders of the country were busy proving who was funnier, taking pot shots at each other's careers, aspirations and skills. And funnily, this was much better than what we saw in the last session. Because the last time these lawmakers got together, they turned the National Assembly into a national zoo. Instead of a war of words, there was a battle of fist fights. A few abuses were hurled, some punches were thrown, and budget copies were tossed like ping-pong balls. You can see it all there. It's true what they say. The problem with political jokes is that they get elected. Speaking of, Donald Trump is back in action. He wants to hit the Democrats where it hurts the most: illegal immigration. In his bid to reclaim the spotlight, Trump paid a visit to the very place that made his political career, the Mexico border wall. But as Trump tries to return to the political mainstream, the growing legal scrutiny around his organization could push him back into political oblivion. Here's a report.
It was a speech scheduled to make the headlines. Donald Trump paid a visit to the US-Mexico border. Standing before the partially completed border wall he promised, the former US president repeated himself. He hasn't gotten over the election yet.
Biden is destroying our country, and it all started with a fake election.
Trump wanted to capitalize on attacks by the Republicans on the issue of growing illegal immigration. but he didn't get the spotlight he was hoping for. Instead of his rallies, the lawsuits against Trump's businesses are gaining more attention. Reports say the Trump Organization and its chief financial officer have been indicted for allegedly evading taxes on lucrative perks like the use of apartments, cars, and school tuition that were given to top executives. The criminal charges could hit Donald Trump hard, both financially and politically. While the former president may not be formally charged himself, the legal battle could bankrupt his company by damaging its relationship with banks and business partners. Ahead of the unexpected unveiling of criminal charges, the CFO of the Trump Organization has surrendered. But Trump himself appears unaffected by the chaos around him. He remains focused on his political future. Soon after the trip to the border wall, Trump gave an interview and teased a presidential run in 2024.
You're not going to answer, but I have to ask. Where are you in the process of, let me ask you this, without giving the answer what the answer is, have you made up your mind?
Yes.
Donald Trump may be out of the White House, but he hasn't given up on politics yet. With 2 rallies in a week, the former president has made a comeback. But if the charges against his businesses are proven, Trump could be pushed back into retirement. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
It is the 1st of July 2021. We are more than 16 months into the pandemic, and we should pat ourselves on our backs. No, really, we should. We have stayed strong for so long, weathered the pandemic so bravely, coped with the new normal. And you know, this would not have been possible without our doctors. Staying calm when everything seems to be falling apart would not have been possible if we did not have doctors to calm us down, to heal us back to health, to help us battle the Wuhan virus, to answer our calls at odd hours, to give us reassurance when we needed it the most. Today, India is celebrating its doctors. It is the National Doctors' Day, a day in memory of Dr. Bidhan Chandra Roy. He is called the first medical consultant of the Indian subcontinent. Allow me to introduce you to him. Dr. Roy was born on the 1st of July, 1882, in the Indian state of Patna. He graduated in mathematics. He went on to study medicine at the Calcutta Medical College and then to London. On his return to India, Dr. Roy began teaching at the Calcutta Medical College. He was also Mahatma Gandhi's physician. He helped in setting up several hospitals. In 1925, he entered politics. In 1948, Dr. Roy became the second Chief Minister of the Indian state of West Bengal. He passed away on the 1st of July, 1962. 1 year before that, Dr. Bidhan Chandra Roy was conferred India's highest civilian award, the Bharat Ratna. In a tweet earlier today, Prime Minister Narendra Modi wrote, and I'm quoting, "India's strides in the world of medicine are commendable and have contributed to making our planet healthier." Messages in honor of doctors have been flooding social media. India and the world as a whole is indebted to the heroes without capes. Think about it. The pandemic came with an unprecedented challenge for everyone, especially for doctors. People were falling sick because of the Wuhan virus, but no one knew anything about the virus, its origins, its symptoms, how it spreads. What should be done to avoid catching this virus? Nothing was known. The world was dealing with a novel coronavirus, and doctors were tasked with curing people of it. In the months that followed, thousands of doctors spent endless hours on the front line. While most of us worked from home and stayed indoors, doctors were out there fighting the Wuhan virus from the front, risking their lives, the lives of their loved ones, battling stigma, abuse, violence. Many doctors lost their lives to this virus. 800 doctors died in India during the second wave alone. More than 100 in the US, at least 230 in the UK. Many more the world over. Many doctors today are battling mental health issues. They're living with stress, anxiety. They've been working in PPE kits for over 16 months now. They're working 24-hour shifts. They're away from families. They've seen people die in front of them, lots of people. And all of this can really take a toll on one's well-being. mental and physical. And yet, despite everything, even today, our doctors are at it, fighting the pandemic relentlessly. They are our real heroes, heroes in PPE kits. Today may not be Doctors' Day in every country around the world. But wherever you're watching us from, it does not hurt to take a moment to say thank you to our frontline workers. So take a little break from whatever you're doing right now and type a quick thank you message to your doctor. It will make their day. And that's a good note, I think, to wrap on. We're leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.